Hello everyone and welcome back. Today, me and my friend Nightmarish Tales have 6 true scary stories for you. So grab your flashlight and follow me into the darkness. Two years ago, I moved to uptown Dallas to a 3-story brownstone. It was really close to the freeway and downtown, but the entrance to my garage and my place were both gated, so I felt quite safe. The first level was a small study, the garage, and an entryway hall. The second floor was a dining area, kitchen, and living room, and the upstairs was master bedroom and bathroom. I am a single woman, and it was just me and my 2 little dogs. The night after I moved in, I was on my computer late at night when someone started ringing my doorbell. No just one ring, but repeated rings. I didn't know a soul in the city yet, so I didn't answer the door. It stopped, and I didn't think anything of it. The houses all looked alike, so someone probably had the wrong place. About 10 minutes later, same thing, followed by pounding on the door. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching to make sure whoever was there left and not sure what to do. The bell and pounding stopped, so I assumed they left. But my 2 dogs were still standing at the door, looking up at the handle. They knew someone was still there. The door was deadlocked, thank God, because what happened next still gives me chills. I saw the door handle turn. Slowly, I called 911, and within a few minutes, cops showed up. Whoever was at the door was gone by then, but my welcome mat was all wet. No idea what the liquid was. The police did not seem concerned and said someone was probably drunk and just at the wrong house. They left. I looked up and went to bed. I forgot about the incident more or less until a couple months later. There was a park across the street, so I took my dogs there a few times a day. One afternoon, I took my dogs on for a walk, locking my door behind me. When I got back, 30 or 45 minutes later, something seemed off. There was a strong smell of men's cologne in the entryway. I thought it was weird, but assumed it was my neighbor's cologne. A single guy lived next door to me, and a guy and girl on the other side. I went upstairs and was cleaning when I noticed something really weird. There was a dollar bill, folded lengthwise, laying on top of my open purse. I never carry cash, and on the rare occasion I do, I certainly don't fold them like that. I don't know what to think. It made so little sense. I just assumed I must have somehow had $1 and ended up putting it like that. A few weeks later, I woke up early in the afternoon on a Saturday after a late night out. I went downstairs to make some tea, and when I was getting my sugar substitute, I found another dollar bill, folded in the same way, just sitting in the cabinet. At this point, I get chills. I could maybe justify the first one, but not the second. I had been in and out of that cabinet the day before, and the dollar bill had not been there. I called the management office and asked if maintenance had been there. They said no one had been to my place since I moved in, and had asked them to hook up my washer. I told them I thought someone had been in my house. They changed my locks, which made me feel better. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked and with a big old can of beer spray by my bed. I truly did not know what to think. Nothing had been stolen from my house, ever. I tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal. I had new looks. I was overreacting, but I never felt very safe in my place again. I didn't have any more dollar bill incidents until my lease ended after 15 months and I was packing up. I started finding random dollars behind a photo of my family on the wall. A dollar bill, folded lengthwise, was taped. In my bedroom, another one under the sink, and another random one on the floor that must have fallen out of something the movers moved. With every dollar I found, I felt so sick. I'm not sure if it was related to the first night when someone tried to get in, but someone was in there with my dogs, who are everything to me, in my house. The people I've told about don't believe me or make jokes about it, so I don't really tell anyone. But I know someone had been in there more than once. Why and how and what the dollars were for, I will never know.
So about 9 years ago, making me 16, I was staying with some friends whilst me and my mom had a cooling off period. After constant arguments and fights, we were too similar. We were always clashing over the smallest of things. I actually stayed with my friend for about 2 months, as the calm atmosphere was good for me. Chaos and drama followed my mom all through her life, and I hated it so much. I thought I hated her for a while too. Teen angst, I guess. Towards the end of me living with my friend in a nice and relaxed atmosphere, mine and my mom's relationship started to get better. Distance makes the heart grow fonder and all of that. I texted her to say that I would pop over for a visit and see how she was and if this time apart was as happy and relaxing as it was for me. I know this doesn't seem like a normal mother and daughter relationship, but my mom was quite an intense individual, and this seeped into her parenting skills. She seemed weird and off with me when she replied, quite snappy and cold. We'd stayed in touch obviously while I was away, and although her mom skills weren't great, she still liked to stay involved best she could to make sure I was doing okay, which made this text seem weird. But like I said, we did argue and clash, so I assumed she was having one of her off days. Me being me, and only 16 at the time, took offense and thought, fine, be that way. So I didn't go over and see her or reply to her cold text. I just left it. Had I just listened to my first instinct that the text was weird, things would have been very different. I was very stubborn and didn't get in touch with her for another week or so. I waited until she got in touch. I was at my friend's house doing revisions for exams when her mom came up to her room to get me. She told me my mom was at the door, but the look on her face scared me. She looked very worried, and it alarmed me. I hurried down the stairs to the front door to see my mom. She looked horrendous. Her usually long, beautiful hair had been hacked off to short and uneven lengths. Her eyes were swollen and black and blue. She had deep cuts all over her face and neck and bruising just everywhere. I burst into tears and I couldn't stop shaking. It was the worst moment of my life to see her like that. My friend's mom made her come inside and sit down and was fuzzing over her. My mom told me on the day I had text to say I was coming over, 3 drug addicts had broken into her house and terrorized her for hours and hours. They had cut her hair off with a knife. They had lifted our TV up and broke it over her back as they smashed it over her. One of the addicts had held a knife to her stomach and tried to stab her, but my mom held him away with her legs, all the while wetting herself. It was absolutely heartbreaking and terrifying to listen to. I think the thing that breaks my heart the most still to this day was one of the people holding her hostage had read my message. He was gonna reply to try to lure me there. But my mom begged and begged, crying and screaming that this guy finally gave up and sent me the message that I received that day. I had never forgiven myself for not thinking more into it. just going around to the house anyway. After the ordeal, they trashed the house and took some things and went on their way. My mom called the police and was taken to the hospital, where she was for a week, and all the while I was in a selfish mode, thinking my mom was a dick and how I was better off away from her. She said she never wanted me to see her in the hospital, as she knew it was an important time with my exams. As it was a small town we lived in, she recognized who two of these people were and was able to identify them, resulting in all three going to prison. One of the attackers was a woman with children. The judge didn't go lightly on them due to a long list of previous convictions, which we were obviously happy about. It's not often the victim of such an attack is granted such justice.
Hi, long-time reader, first-time poster. I never thought I'd have something hit so close to home. For some context, I live in a small Caribbean island in a middle-class neighborhood with my wife and 2-year-old daughter. My townhouse is located in quite a cul-de-sac. On the other side of the house is the main street and a shared driveway. On the other side is a very private courtyard, completely out of sight from the road, which is shared with 2 other townhouses that are very isolated. Beyond the courtyard is overgrown bush and an abandoned house under construction with boarded up windows. This house almost sits on top of the courtyard and just has a bad vibe all the time. All of my windows face the courtyard, the bush, and the abandoned house. There have been many nights I'd been playing PS4 and just caught a weird vibe that someone was watching me from the bush. I eventually got blackout curtains, but still felt eyes on my back, like whoever it was could see the illumination from the TV and know I was awake. Things got real about 3 weeks ago. My daughter is starting school in April, and my wife is a stay-at-home mom, so they are usually home during the day while I'm at work. I work a 9 to 5. It was a Wednesday morning, and my wife asked if I could drop her and my daughter to a nearby mall to do some shopping. I picked them up around 11 a.m., dropped them home, and quickly headed back to the office. Around 12:30 p.m., while my wife was in the kitchen, one of my neighbors started pounding on our door. My next-door neighbor across the courtyard had just come home, walked around by her very isolated back door, and found that someone had broken the glass door on the patio facing the bush. I rushed home to check the scene out, and we waited for the police. We had no idea who it was. All we knew is that the break-in occurred between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. while everyone's cars were gone. My wife is usually home at this time, but this day she was out. What bothered me was that the houses are all built the same way with the same doors. I was probably creeped out at this point and asked my wife to not open the blinds and curtains while she was home alone. A week passed by and everything seems normal again, or as normal as can be. The incident is still in our minds, but we get on with life. Another week passes by and it's a Tuesday night. I was awake playing this game called Fortnite until about 1:30 a.m. I decided it was getting late and headed downstairs for a snack. Came back up and lay down reading the sub before I drifted off. I remember around 2 a.m. I heard what sounded like 3 bonks that made me pause. I told myself it was the wind, but when I looked outside, the night was deadly quiet. It wasn't windy at all. I remember checking every window and even turning off the fans in the house so I could hear better. The voice in my head kept saying that those bangs sounded human, but I could not see anything and drifted off to sleep again. Around 3:45 a.m., I was walking by the neighbor's dogs across from my driveway on the main street barking. I usually would just go back to sleep, but my body shut up and I felt cold. I rushed to the window facing the driveway and saw a tall Rasta man pulling the door on all the cars. I wanted to shout at him in my accent, "Yo, what the fuck you doing? Get the fuck from out of here." But again, I paused. As he walked away down the street, I realized he was holding a machete. That night, I could not get back to sleep. I called the police to inform them what I saw, but they never came. The next morning, I messaged all my neighbors to let them know what I saw the night before. Everyone was on edge that morning, wondering what the fuck was going on. My neighbor with the dogs has surveillance cameras facing my driveway and caught the prowler as he moved around the houses, checking windows, doors, and cars, confirming what I had seen. He had disappeared into the courtyard, out of sight for a while that night. I left for work at 9 a.m., and the last thing I told my wife was to close the blinds a bit more. I just had a weird vibe coming from the bush. Around 10:30 a.m., I received a call from my wife. I stupidly cancelled it and tried video calling her back to chat with my daughter. She ended it immediately and a call came through again. This time, I answered, and it's like everything in my world stopped. She was whispering and in tears. She sounded very scared. All I heard was, "There is a man beating the door down right now in the courtyard." My fucking phone battery died at this point. I was in a state of panic. I rushed to my car and flew home in under 10 minutes. I pulled into the courtyard so damn hard and fast. Fortunately, the man had not broken down my door, but my neighbor's door again. It was smashed. I wasn't even expecting what happened next. I thought the man was in and out. The same Rasta man I saw at 4 a.m. came flying out the door with a large knife, hopped over a fence, and ran through the bushes, collecting a backpack he had slashed away. After the police arrived and neighbors up the hill came out, we all started talking and a picture of what happened that morning became clear. My neighbor who lives up the hill from us saw a man enter my neighbor's yard and walk to the back door after she left for work. He then watched as the man hammered and sizzled out a door with a deadbolt. He called the police with hopes they'd come and catch him. That didn't happen. The man sizzled at the door for 12 minutes. This time, my wife was in the kitchen and was hearing hammering, but could not see him, as he was in a blind spot from our home. She went to check the living room and heard our back door knob start violently shaking. She ran back to the kitchen and the noise had stopped. When she looked through the courtyard window, a man was staring right back at her. He then proceeded to my neighbor's other glass door, and in one hit, he was inside. My wife ran upstairs with my daughter and locked herself in the bedroom and called me. The police took over 30 minutes to show up that morning, and my wife refuses to go back to the house. As most days, she's the only one in the cul-de-sac when everyone is out. We were renting the place, so she packed all our belongings and we are currently in temporary accommodation, looking for another home that isn't so isolated. Gonna get a dog as well when we move to stay in the house with her. She says the man is still out there and she feels like he will come back for her one morning if we don't move.
I'll give you a little background to set the scene. One of my best friends from when I was 14 was Matt. His family lived out in the country on the corner of an intersection, adjacent to miles of cornfields. It was right on the edge of going out into the middle of nowhere. They had a wooden fenced-in backyard with a barn they used to store everything for their lawn and garden. However, there was a second story with a balcony that we turned into our hangout spot. We'd often run power up there and camp out during the summer. It would usually end up being about 6 to 8 of us, just hanging out and having a blast. Well, being out there and not wanting to be holed up in the barn all night, we would usually go out in the yard, walk down the country roads at night, or go through the fields and walk the creeks. It sounds boring, but we always had a blast doing that. Exploring at night with nobody around, keeping the flashlights off and adjusting your eyes to the darkness, not having to worry about cars or people being around. We would always feel safe being that we would always go out in groups of 6 to 8 of us. That and the farmers of the area gave us permission to go through the fields, so long as there were no crops at the time. So one fall night after the 6 of us get bored of playing video games for hours on end, we decided to go walk through the adjacent fields. It was around 11 p.m. when we decided to head out, so we throw a couple of flashlights in the backpack and head off. It was a nice, cool night. The moon was just a sliver, and the sky didn't have a cloud in it. It was perfect. We trekked through the first field, just laughing it up and having a great time. But all of our cheer would soon turn to absolute dread. There was a creek in a ravine dividing 2 of the fields that we followed, getting further and further until Matt's house was on the horizon. At this point, we'd been walking for about an hour and a half. It was going on 12:30 a.m. We decided we'd walk a little further and then turn back, something we all greatly regretted. As we make our way down the creek, we noticed what looked like a stump on the other side, way up ahead in the field, maybe about 20 feet away from the creek. It was odd because we had made this journey dozens of times. There was never a tree, let alone a stump in that field. As our curiosity piqued, we decided to check it out. It was still about 100 feet up the creek, but we decided to jump the creek and go check it out anyway. The first 2, Chris and Mike, jumped over the creek, and right as Matt is getting ready to jump, my heart sank. The stump moved. As soon as I blurted out, "Wait, it just moved," it stood up. The silhouette of a man standing in the field in the middle of nowhere was now facing us. We were all frozen. Chris and Mike jumped back over to our side of the creek, and we slowly started backing away, not looking away from the figure. It stood there for about a minute, which seemed like an eternity, and then it started off on a full-on sprint on the other side of the creek, heading right for us. We instantly turned around and ran as fast as we could away from the creek to the road, and went straight for Matt's house. We could vaguely make out glimpses of it from the road, just waiting for it to jump the creek and catch up with us. The adrenaline had my feet moving so fast it felt like I was floating. As we came up on the last quarter-mile stretch of road before making it back, we noticed the figure had stopped, barely making out his silhouette across the field. We ran around to the back of Matt's house and went straight to our loft in the barn. A huge sigh of relief filled the air. We were safe. Shaken, we all couldn't wrap our heads around the fact that there was some psycho just crouching in a field in the middle of the night. We finally started to calm down and relax a bit. Being too afraid to leave the barn, we decided when we had to piss, we'd piss off the balcony. As the night went on, around 2:30, Mike went to go do his business. Not 10 seconds later, he came bursting back in, his face pale white.
"He's fucking walking through the neighbor's backyard."
At this point, I seriously thought we were gonna die. Why is he following us? Why is he so persistent on finding us? And what does he want? We quietly made our way down the stairs and got to the door. At this point, we had no idea where he was, so we could either wait it out or hope he didn't see or hear us up in the loft or make a run for the house. We all agreed that we would be much safer behind the deadbolt of a house versus a small lock that could be kicked in on the barn. So we ran for the house, key in hand ready, praying it wouldn't get dropped on the way. Shortly after, we all piled in the back door, which leads into the garage with another door from the garage to the house. We all stood silent as we heard the gate to the fence creak open. After hearing silence, we slowly crept into the house, trying not to make a noise. Matt made his way to his parents' room, as we stood still in the kitchen, peering out the window to the backyard, unfortunately only seeing darkness. He woke his parents, told them everything, and they instantly called the police. As this was going on, we all listened in horror to what sounded like someone demolishing the barn. We all hid in the living room, hoping this freak wouldn't break into the house before the police arrived. After what seemed like forever, the police showed up and stormed the backyard. Whoever it was that was after us was now gone. The barn door was kicked in, the whole upstairs looked like a tornado went through it. And creepiest of all, the back door handle to the house has been smashed off. Thank God for the deadbolt, or we might have been hanging on meat hooks by daytime. We never slept up there again, never went on night walks, and never returned to those fields. Matt's family moved a few years later, and I've never gone back to that area. They never caught the guy, we never saw his face. I think about it all the time. It just gives me a chill every time I think about the fact that he wasn't caught. He could still be out there. I'll never understand why he was crouched in that field in the middle of the night, a good mile at least from the nearest house, and what caused him to snap and want to get us so bad. I really wonder if it was someone drugged up on PCP, but how did he end up there? There are so many questions that I'll never get the answers to, and knowing he wasn't caught is the worst part.
Long-time lurker, first-time poster. I was 26 at the time, 8 months pregnant, and alone. Tom had always been friends with my friends throughout high school. He was the quiet, hard kid who had insane natural talent. Seemed nice enough, but despite always wearing a smile, he just gave people, girls mostly, the feeling that something was off with him. I never spent a lot of one-on-one time with him because of this, but I never had any reason to believe he was dangerous, just weird. Anyways, years after high school, I reconnect with my high school sweetheart Jamie, who happens to be best friends with Tom. Everything was going great for Jamie and me. We were married, starting a family, remolding an old family home on acres of land that was our own, the dream. Tom had become a regular staple at gatherings. He did have a weapons fascination and liked to brag on himself, but nothing that made him seem threatening. Tom, by this time, had married a woman who was old enough to be our mothers. These two were not a healthy, cohesive couple, and apparently they had gotten physical with one another. From what Tom told us though, she would flip and attack him, not an excuse for him. I still thought they both needed help. In the midst of this though, Tom had started drinking and lying about his drinking. He was showing up at our house drunk. Jamie told him to show up sober or don't come over at all. I was pregnant and he didn't want that at our home. Months go by, no words from Tom. That is until one day he calls my husband, waiting to chat. He sounds very depressed. Jamie has him come by and they chat outside. He wants to leave his wife. Good for him. But something isn't right. Even more so than normal, Jamie sneaks to his scooter while Tom uses our restroom and Jamie sees a bottle of vodka. While Jamie is still outside, Tom all of a sudden doesn't have to use the restroom anymore. He turns to me and looks me up and down, so cold and expressionless. You know, Jess, women are most beautiful when they're pregnant. You'll never be more gorgeous. He makes a move to go closer to me, but by this time, Jamie is walking in. Come outside, we need to talk. Shortly afterwards, I hear Tom leave and Jamie tells me about the alcohol. I tell him about the creepy comment and we both agree that he can't be trusted. He was not welcome here anymore. Tom stopped calling, no texts, nothing. Jamie reached out to make sure he was okay. No response. From what he heard from his family, he was okay, just working and staying busy trying to keep sober. We really hoped he was taking care of himself. Months later, and I am 8 months pregnant. I'm not longer working, and Jamie works 6 days a week. That's a lot of time alone. His schedule was always the same and had not changed in years. Randomly, on a day Jamie was at work, Tom shows up at our house at 10 a.m. I usually napped around that time because I was huge and tired. Luckily, I was awake and in our front door. It had a huge window that faced our driveway and the door led to our garage. I showed him a nervous wave through my window. He didn't seem to see me and was grabbing something out of a duffel. He pulled out a shotgun. I know there's fight or flight, but I just froze. He takes a swig of something and suddenly notices me, sheer horror on my face. In return, I get a hateful look. He says something I can't hear, then smiles. Not a happy smile. Packs up his gun and leaves. I immediately called Jamie. He didn't answer. I text totally freaked out and checking logs. Jamie calls back about 10 minutes later. As we are talking, trying to make sense of what just happened, Jamie's dad calls. Tom tried to break into his home. Thankfully, James' dad is always armed. He caught him red-handed, but doesn't call the cops because of their long-standing friendships with Tom and the fact they had bailed my husband out as a wild teenager. Apparently, he hadn't had his gun out when he caught him, so didn't feel threatened. Not happy about that, but wasn't my choice. That alone was scary and super confusing, but what Jamie told me later really freaked me out. When I was working, I worked a set schedule except from occasionally I'd be called in. One day, Jamie called in sick and I was called in to work. I hated leaving him sick, but duty called. Jamie said he had been napping a little after 9 due to a high fever. He had a walking at some point to the sound of doors opening and closing, but was so out of it and figured it must have been his imagination. Fever dreams are wild. What woke him up though and kept him at least semi-alert was the bell on our bedroom door. He heard it jiggle twice lightly. He vaguely remembers looking up and seeing what looked like Tom at the end of the bed staring at him, not moving. He said he passed out from the fever and came to not much longer. He was gone. So Jamie figured it was just the fever messing with him. He wasn't so sure anymore. It's been over 2 years and we make no attempts to call to Tom. He uses to drive by from time to time, but never try to make contact. That has stopped, but I still make sure all of my locks and windows are secure. Tom, let's not meet ever again.
I was at home alone playing Call of Duty between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. During this time, I got a phone call from a random phone number. And of course, the first thing I think of is that it's just somebody who's either prank calling me or just doesn't have the right number. After I hung up, a few seconds later, I received a phone call from the same number. When this happened, I'll admit I felt a little chill run down my spine. But since I was home alone, I was thinking that if this person was just prank calling me, I could just say whatever I want until either I or the person hangs up. So I answered. I said hello in a sort of annoyed voice, but there was no response. Instead, all I heard was something that still freaks me out. I heard what sounded like a cat hissing, but in a much deeper pitch. And of course, out of surprise, I became defensively hostile. I said into the phone,
Look, buddy, if you call this number again, I'll have my friend who's a police officer track this number down and arrest you.
But this didn't even faze whoever was on the other end of the phone. Instead, all I got in response was a disturbing, low-pitched laughter. My heart dropped.
Why are you calling?
I said. Then, this is what still gives me nightmares to this day. As clear as day, in a dark, almost demonic voice, I heard,
I'm just waiting for you to come upstairs.
Without hesitation, I ran out of the house and ran across the street to my friend's house and asked his dad to call my dad while trying to explain to him what happened at the same time. After he called my dad, my friend's dad called the police. They arrived in 5 minutes and found nothing upstairs, but they did find the back door open.
Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my friend Nightmarish Tales because he has amazing stories for you. Take care, and I will see you all in my next video.